Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and we're going to make a gorgeous handmade leather purse. Now, big point to this video, we're going to keep the design simple. It's a basic design, but let's go all out on our decoration. Reptile, spots, trunk handles, is that not beautiful? Now, we've got a lot of steps here, but they are all simple. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to our website. So let's step over here, look at our pattern. We have got nothing but rectangles and straight lines. Super easy pattern. So let's start right here on our main body. We're going to go 13 inches wide, 24 inches long. We're going to come in 10 inches from either end. That's going to give us a 4-inch bottom. Now on our strapping, we're coming in 3 inches from either side. All of our holes are going to line up to that, except right here. We're going to center this hole and we're going to come in 1 inch, same on the other end. That's going to give us a little strap. We've got a billet closure. So easy enough on our main body. Let's jump over to a digital pic of our gusset and straps. So on our gusset, 4 by 10 inch. Now we're adding a 1/4 inch to either side and a 1/4 inch to the bottom for our stitch line. Now on our straps, we're cutting 4 of these. Here's why. We could absolutely make one long strap. The problem is we're going with a chrome. We can't really use a strap cutter. So it's going to be hard to get 32 inches consistently 1 inch. So let's just bust that in half. So we're going to bust that down to 16 inches. We're going to cut 4 of those. But notice there, just about every measurement is in 1 inch increments. There's our little billet for our closure. And the last, our trunk handle. I've just got a blank here. We're going to go 26 inches on this. And we're going to simply butt to either end, mark for our holes in our taper. You can make that any length you want. Okay, so we've got a good feel for the main body. Let's jump over to this diamond. This is simply 2.5 inches by 5 inches. But what we need to do, there's our cut there. But for our secondary cut, we're going to cut this at 3 by 6. So therefore, when we drop that in, we know we've got a 1/4 inch all the way around for our stitch line. So easy enough there. Let's jump over, start cutting some leather. We're going to use 3 different leathers for this project. You can use 2 or you can use 1. You'll see where I'm going with this. So for our exterior, we're going to use our deer tan cow, and I love this leather. Very supple, and I love the natural torn edge. Anyway, this is a very supple leather. We can absolutely make a purse out of this, but for our design, I want a little bit more body. So therefore, we're going to line this leather. Now, if you're new to leathercraft, we're simply gluing 2 pieces of leather together, and there's all kinds of reasons we would do that. In this situation, it's simply to give the leather or the purse a little body. So right here for our liner, our interior leather, we're going to use our 4 to 5 ounce water buffalo. Love this leather as well. We use this in a number of videos. And in fact, this makes a great purse just by itself. But for us crafters, it's a relatively inexpensive cut. But again, it's got some body, but it remains supple. So that's our liner. Now our third piece, we're going to drop in some of our reptile. We're just going to drop in a small window. Now for us crafters, this is a little expensive, but here's the key point. We're typically going to use smaller pieces, just like this project. So therefore, a side of this is going to last me for years. All kinds of projects will come out of that. So when we're lining, I would typically cut my face leather to size. We'll overcut our liner, glue it together, and then trim the liner to size. But since this is such a very supple leather, let's overcut both pieces, then trim to size. So on my deer tan cow, I'm just going to lay this in to where I can get about 1/2 inch all the way around. So let's cut this piece out. Now on this, we can absolutely be as efficient as we want to. There we go. But let's give ourselves enough room, and here's why. If we don't get that glue right to the edge, I don't want an air pocket. So if I can get to within at least 1/2 inch of that edge, I know I've got glue. So let's set that piece aside. Let's cut our backing the same way, about 1/2 inch all the way around. Good. So that piece is cut oversized. Let's lay that aside. Roll this up and I'm going to bring the deer back out. When we cut our inset, let's just lay this roughly in the middle, and I'm going to trace this in with a pen. We're going to cut outside of the ink line, so therefore that's going to disappear. Good. We'll lay our pattern in on this and then trim to size. So right here, let's cut this out, and we're going to cut on the outside of our ink line. Okay, well that looks clean. Very good. Let's set that aside. Now, point I didn't mention, but new knife blade every time when we're working with the more supple leathers. So on our Reptile, there we go. Now I love to cut my patterns out of our pattern sheeting because now I can see where my pattern is. So what I'd like to do is get one of these long lines of a darker color right in the center. So let's do that. Let's put that right there. Now, good point. There's the piece that we cut our window from. This is the piece that we're cutting our Reptile from. So therefore, that's going to be larger than our window. So let's drop this in, trace it, and cut it. Reptile is cut. Let's take our main body, and on our inside, let's take our oversized piece. Let's lay that in around the window, and I can see that's equal distance all the way around. Just as a simple guide, so when we lay in our Reptile, we know we've got a 1/4 inch, and we're not going to miss with our stitch line. So let's take some of our double-sided tape, and I'm going to drop this on all 4 sides of our diamond. And peel our backing off. Let's drop that in right to our line. Stick that down. This is great tape. Big help to us. So this piece is ready to glue on to our backing. So I'm going to reset here, get the glue out. Let's glue our main body. We're going to go with a contact cement. And I love the S18. Smaller container. That's economical for us crafters. With a contact cement, we've got to add to both sides. Let that dry and then put together. This is going to make the leather react as one piece. Now, take forever with a little brush in the top of this. So let's go with a trim roller. Now I do want to come back. So I'll glue the majority of the body here, but I'm going to come back with my brush and let's get relatively close to that edge. Again, to make sure we don't have any air pockets. Well, that looks good. We've got glue almost to the edge all the way around, but at the same time, we've got some room for error there. Now we're going to give this 5 minutes, but let's do this. We've got some more gluing to do. We'll have to glue our straps and our gussets, so let's take our roller and drop that in a baggie and just twist that around. So therefore, that's going to stay wet, give us enough time to work with this. So let's give this about 5 minutes, let that glue dry, wick in. One big point with the contact cement that I didn't yet mention, we need good ventilation here. I've got a good cross breeze in my shop, so it's not a problem. So let's do this. So let's take our main body pattern, lay that right in on our diamond. That looks good, easy to line up. Now we can always use a pen because we're going to cut inside the line. But I want this piece to be as accurate as I can. I want it as square as possible. So let's take an awl and let's press that right in our 4 corners. And I can feel that. I've got leather, both cuts or both plies all the way around. So let's cut this to size. New blade again. Now we've got some waste when we over trim everything. But the outcome is this. Look at that edge. That looks like it's one piece of leather. But how easy was it to line up? It was no issue at all. Good. Let's set this aside because we've used that as an example. So for the balance of the project, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. But here's a couple of tips, and we'll look at these. So on my gussets, I'm going to cut a piece of leather large enough to bust both pieces out. Same thing on my straps. So this is 1 inch wide by 16 long. So I'm simply going to do a panel that's about 5 inches. We need 4 of these. So about 5 inches by 17, and again, trim to size, same right here. But we'll look at these as they come out. Let's start right here. I'm going to bust a straight edge down this side, and I want to make sure I've got our deer and our backing liner in there. So let's bust a straight edge here and then square across the top. Good. Now we need 3/4 inch there, so let's pull that out. Good. Now on our straps, always difficult to mark chrome tans. Black being absolutely impossible. But let's do this. Let's take our square. To get a really accurate cut, what I can do is I can use my straight edge. So let's drop in a cut at 1 inch increments, and we need 4. Good. Now let's strap these out. Good. Let's see how we stack up here. Very nice. Happy with that. I'm going to do the same thing to the balance, but we'll end with our trunk handles because we'll make a cut, then punch on those. One last point though. We can always mark on the back of our pattern. The problem is, and this is easy to mark, but the problem is if we have indentions or cuts in our cutting surface, when we cut across that, our top grain, very supple, is going to sink down into those. We're going to have a very uneven edge. So as hard as it is to mark on our chromes, let's go ahead and do our best. We're going to use an awl. Now the camera really, well, probably can see that. That's not bad, but an awl is going to be a big help to us. So I'm going to do the same thing here and over here. We are cut to width and length. Everything looks good. Now our next step is to mark, but we still have a little bit of cutting to do. This is our trunk handle, and we've got a great video on this. So I'm just going to touch on the high points. So on this end, let's start right here. I'm going to mark with my awl. These are my rivet holes. Now right here, we're going to taper. So on my line, that's the end of my straight edge there. Let's just go ahead and put 2 marks right there. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side and the other ends. Our marks are in. So for our taper, let's do this. We're going to cut from this mark down. Now we're going from 1.5 to 1 inch. So we're basically taking a 1/4 inch off either side. Now if it's a hair more or hair less, we'll never see that. But let's get a good even cut here. And our last cut, we can open that up, clip that so it goes just a little bit further. So that's even now. All right, let's step over. We're going to mark the balance of our project right here. No marks required. Let's set that aside. So let's mark right here and for our strap. On our straps, we could certainly go maybe a 1/2 inch shorter. To me, in my opinion, I'd like to have a little extra room there when we're lining. In this situation, not required. Now, good pattern work here. For my holes where I'm going to actually punch, I'm going to mark those with a black Sharpie. But where we're going to simply mark for our spots, I'm going to use a red Sharpie there. That just keeps us from getting confused and punching a hole where we don't need it. So let's jump over to our main body. Now on this, we just have our strap holes, snap, and strap holes. We are punched, so let's take everything except our gussets. No holes needed there. Let's take this batch over to our punch table, punch some holes. Let's start with our trunk handles. These look to be the most confusing, but they're really not. So let's start here. I'm going to spread my 2 cuts. Now, I've got a 1 inch English point. 3/4, 7/8, 1 1/4 will work. But notice right here, I've got a mark 2/3 in from my edge on both sides. So what I'm going to do, let's flip this around. I'm going to take the corner of the tool, I'm going to drop that just a hair inside the end of my cut. Then I'm going to put that blue line right on the edge. So there we go. We've got a good clean punch. Now let's do the same on the other side. Good, even taper. It's as easy as that. So I'm going to do the other 3 sides. Those look good. We're going to use a rivet. We'll rivet these onto our main body. So let's go with 1/8 inch round hole, and let's do that 4 holes, each side, each end. Let's jump over to a 1 inch round end. That's going to be a nice touch here. Well, that looks good. Very clean, very professional, very easy to do. So on our straps, we've got 4 of these. Now, with our pattern, let's keep this close because again, we've got spots here. So down at the bottom, we've got this single mark. We're going to go up to a 3/16 inch round hole because we're going to use a Chicago screw down here. Our next step up here, we're going to use a rivet. So let's jump back to our 1/8 inch and we're just going to do these 4 end holes. We've got that, looks good there. Now let's put a 1 inch round end on each of these, both ends. Well, everything is looking good thus far. Let's set these aside. Our little billet, we're going to do 1/8 of an inch. Now, we're going to do a rivet and a snap here, but 1/8 of an inch, a snap post will go through that. So let's drop our holes in. A 3/4 inch round end punch. And let's do this. Let's give this a little extra room there. So we've got a tab. There we go. Well, that looks good. Now, last thing, let's jump over to our main body. Now, right here, on our 4 center marks, we're going to drop a Chicago screw in here. So let's jump back to the 3/16. Now, every other hole is just a rivet hole. So let's go back to the 1/8 inch. That looks good. Very cool. Easy thus far. Again, just rectangles and straight lines. Let's go back to our main table. We're going to drop in a groove line, which is going to sound odd on chromes, but it's going to work for us. We don't normally think of using a groover on chrome tans. Great for veg tan, but all we're going to use this for is a guide for our chisel or our stitch line. We can drag that along our edge easily and lightly. That's going to give us more than enough guide. Here's the point though. I want to groove every piece that I'm going to sew together at one time with one setting. Let's don't change this up mid-project. If we do, then we're going to have a perfect meet on our edge every time. So, one more point. Somebody was talking and didn't punch the other end of our billet. So I've got a 3/4 inch round end on that. Let's start with our trunk handles because right here, we simply need a groove line from the inside of our taper, both sides, both pieces. Well, that looks good. We can certainly see that. Now, we should sew our billet, but we're not going to. We've got some good glue on that. Same on our straps. Now, on our gussets, what I'm going to do is groove all 4 sides. We'll put a stitch line across the top, but we don't need to hit the inside of our cuts here. Well, that's easy enough to see. Good. On our main body, we're going to do all 4 sides and our window. Good. Now, again, this is just a guide. Once we drop in our chisel line and our stitch line, we'll never see this. So 4 sides. Well, that looks good, easy enough to see. So let's set that aside. Now let's break off here. Let's do two things. Let's go ahead and drop our spots in on our straps. Those will be ready to assemble. And let's jump over and knock out our trunk handles as well. So let's step over to our punch table, drop in some spots. We have several ways to set spots. First off, we've got our little wonder. And I love this. It's easy, it's fast, there's even a guide there. So our spot is always where we want it. Secondly, we've got a setter that is simply a tube and a throat. Works well. If we don't have either, just like a sewing machine, let's don't let that stop us from setting some beautiful spots. So, 5 steps to this. Now, sounds like it's going to be tedious. It isn't. We're going to do 5 steps. But what we'll do is let's do all of our first step. Let's do all of our second. Makes it go pretty fast. So let's start right here. Now, I'm right-handed, so this is going to be a little tough. But I'm going to take my spot. There we go. I'm going to straddle that hole, my mark, and I'm going to press the tines in. Okay? Camera probably cannot see that, but I can. Yeah, that's not bad. Let's take a craft knife. Now, we want to mimic the shape of our tines. The point is, I don't want more hole than tine. So let's take our knife and right on that mark, just press through. Now, let's flip that around and press from the other side. We're just opening that hole up. So now let's take our spot. We're going to push that through. Good. That sinks right down. Now on the back, let's flip this over. Let's be careful. We're going to take the back end of our art knife. We're going to bend our tines inward. Now let's take a mallet. We're not going to crush this. We're not going to hit this hard enough to crush. But you'll see, if we just tap that a couple of times, now when I run my finger across that, I almost can't feel our 2 tines. They're actually curved in on each other. So therefore, very clean spot. So I'm going to do the balance, do the same thing for the balance. Well, those look good, easy to do. Now let's do this. Look at that. Notice how clean and straight that line of spots is. Set by hand, so we can absolutely do that. Now, I didn't mention this. It's just a little cardboard pallet. So when I press my knife through my leather, I don't ding my blade. Now let's reset while we're here. We're going to drop our chisel line in on our trunk handles. Get those knocked out. Basically what we're doing is getting all the extra pieces ready to assemble so that once the purse is done, we simply knock these on. Project is complete. Trunk handles are very easy to make and they look very professional. But there's 2 things we need. We need the same number of holes on both sides. Well, that makes sense, but it's easy to do. But also it helps if our holes are parallel. Again, easy to do. So let's start on this end. I'm going to come in just about 1/4 of an inch from my taper. Let's put that chisel right in our groove line. There we go. Let's see if we can feel tines all the way across. We can. In fact, my chisel is going right through this leather. Let's go ahead and do a second. First tine, last hole. Now on this side, let's just lay our chisel down. There we go. I can see right where the outside edge of that tine is. So let's drop that in our groove line. And a second hit. First tine, last hole. Let's just look. We're just eyeballing this. Okay, I'm a little longer over here. So what I can do is I can stretch this out just a little bit. I can push more towards the edge of this last tine hole. So let's do that. And let's do 2. First tine, last hole. And then jump over to the other side. Now I'm going to push in just a little bit. You'll notice we can contract or stretch our stitch line if we need to. But let's do that. And one more time. Now let's take a look. Perfect. That's absolutely perfect. So I'll do that the rest of the way down. Same on the other side. Well, those look good. Easy enough and not too much time to chisel. Since these are this close, let's go ahead and drop in our cording and sew these, get these ready for assembly. We're going to glue in our cording. Now we're simply doing that to keep it from working out. I've got a product I bought some time back where the cording has started to work out. It's not going back in. But really, the point there, we're just going to secure this in. Now, we're going with 1.5 inch wide or 3.81 centimeters. we've got about a 7 or maybe 8 millimeter. I'm not exactly sure, but it's simply a nylon cording. We can get this at any hardware store. So let's trim this in, trim a good clean end. Now, we've got a lighter and we've got glue. We need to be careful there. But let's just heat that up, let that nylon burn down, good. Now on the other end, let's come down to right about our last chisel mark, do the same thing. And let's do the same thing for the other side. Our cording is ready, good. Now on our glue, we're going to drop some glue down the center. It's going to be tough to get glue on this, but really again, we're just using the glue to seal this in. So we just need a little glue on one side. Good. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. We're going to give it a minute, let that glue dry some. A little bit of dry time, that's all we need. Now, when we sew these, this cording is not going to stay there. It's not a problem. It'll sit in there and it will center for us. Okay, let's sew our trunk handles. We're going to use a basic saddler stitch. We've got some great videos on this, but let's go over the highlights. So right here, our number 18 John James needles. It's a great needle. In fact, it's my favorite size. Our sewing pony. This is going to be a big help right here. This is going to make sewing these very easy. Now our thread. This is a Reptile 0.8 millimeter in the brown. That's going to look good on our project. Now the last point, our length. We're actually going further across than lengthwise when we sew this. So let's go about 4 times our length. And the last point, we took a little extra time to line up our holes. That's going to make our sewing very easy. So on our pony, let's bend this over. Let's come out about maybe an inch, inch and a half. And let's clamp that down. Good. Now, again, basic saddler stitch. We could always start in our second hole, come back, and sew from there. That'd give us a double loop. But right here, for the most part, we're not going to have a lot of outward stress on this. So let's start in our first hole. Let's bring our needle through, equal out. And also, too, once we get this bent over, then the sewing's going to be very easy. For our second hole, now we can just pull our needles out. I've got that hole on this side opened up, so I'm not splitting my thread. Come back through and through the second hole on the other side. Now let's crank that down. Good. Now it's going to open a little bit, but that's not a problem. As we sew, it will tighten 2 or 3 stitches back. This is going to look good. It's going to be a good meet. So now, if I can get, there we go. Now we're just sewing. Okay, let's just move our trunk handle another inch or 2. But now that this is coming together, sewing's very easy, but look at that meat. That's just what we're looking for. As we're sewing, if you're having trouble pushing your needle through, just try this. Take your thread, pull it down, and now we can put our fingernail right up under that. That helps it push, or helps us push that needle right through. So as we come to our end, we're just going to hide a knot. And in fact, that didn't take but about 4 minutes, and we'll look at the meat here in just a second. But let's come through one side. Let's come through one side. Now let's simply tie a square knot right here. So that's right over left, circle around, draw that down good and tight. Now left over right, circle around, draw that down in good and tight. There we go. That's going to be a good knot for us. So let's just take our knife, and again, we don't often use this part of our blade. So let's lay that down and let's pull our thread across that. Now we're not cutting into leather. Well, look at that meat. That looks great. That's because we use that groover and we've got a consistent groove line and chisel line. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to our second trunk handle. Well, that looks good. That probably took about 10 minutes to hand sew these. Very professional. Very happy with these. So let's step over to our main table. We're going to work on our main body because we're getting close. Our groove lines are in. So we're going to chisel and sew our throats on both of our gussets, on our main body, and our window. Basically, we're breaking our sewing up. Give our hands time to rest. So on a gusset, we're going to have an incoming stitch line. I don't want to get too close to that. but it's easy enough. Let's just butt the edge of our chisel against the edge of our leather. See where that second tine lands? Let's just drop our first tine right there. That gives that stitch line, incoming stitch line, room. We'll do the same thing on the other end. Good, those are ready to sew. Let's jump over to our main body. Start with our window. Now, let's do a single tine on each of our corners right on our groove line. Okay, let's do this just to make this as consistent as we can. So say we're going to drop our next chisel right there. So there's 6. Well, let's see if we can do this backwards. There we go. So my next chisel is going to land right here to make it consistent. So let's see if this is going to fit. There we go. There's 6. First tine, last hole. There we go. We're a little long right there. So let's do this. When we start off from this hole, let's come out just a little bit further than we normally would. There we go. That looks good. First tine, last hole. And there we go. Our distance is relatively consistent there. So I'm going to work my way around in the same manner. Okay, we've got our window done. Now across our throat, same thing. We're going to have an incoming stitch line. So let's come in just a little bit and work our way across. Well, that looks good. Let's step over, put a stitch line in our throats and our window. This will be the easiest sewing. We're just running straight across, not connecting anything. So I'd say about 4 times our length, maybe a little bit more. The one thing we don't want to do though, as we sew through this, is give it too much tension. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Good. Now let's give that just enough tension to where I can see that stitch sink just a little bit. If we pull too hard, what's going to happen is we'll get a ripple across here. But all told, again, this will be our easiest sewing. When we get to our end, and in fact, I don't even think that took an entire minute. Looks good. We don't really have a great place to hide our knot. So let's just come through our last hole, 1 needle. Let's tie our square knot on the back. Now we've got a good knot. Let's take our threads. We could always add a little dab of glue here, but all told, these are going to sit in there. We're just going to pull that thread back through. Basically, we're giving a little room to the end of that thread beyond the knot, so therefore it's not going to work out. But for the most part, that's going to be virtually unseen. But if somebody does by chance see that, hallmark of a hand-sewn piece. There we go. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other. Good. Those pieces are done. Let's jump over to our main body. Now, we've got some mechanical down here. Let's just put a small piece of our shipping paper in there. Let's fold this over. Now that'll slide in, and we're not worried about the exterior or interior getting chewed up. So let's clamp that down. 4 times our length, same thing. Okay, well that looks good. Very clean and consistent. Let's do the same on the other end. Okay, that looks good. So let's scoot this up. Now, in one of my shot videos, I've simply got a clip on some suede and a slip knot so I can raise or lower this. The point here is that I can lift a larger project up, tighten my slip knot there. Good. Now that's going to hold for me. So, over on our diamond, we don't have a good place to hide our knot again. So let's start right at the bottom. We'll sew all the way around, and then we'll drop our knot in at the bottom, and it won't be visible. Well, that looks good. Now, is it absolutely perfect? No, but it's also hand sewn, handmade. Absolutely. So I'm going to tie my square knot back here, right at the bottom. There we go. Now I'm not really going to worry about running my two little tails back through. Let's leave that right where it is. So let's step over to our main table. We're going to hammer down this part of our stitch line. It's going to dress it up a little bit. Like I said, to me, chromes don't typically hand sew as well as veg tan. But nonetheless, either one, when we hammer down our stitch line, we're just going lightly. We're closing down our holes and we're spreading that stitch line out. Good, so you can see a visible difference, but also on the back, that presses that knot down nicely. So I'm going to do the throat here and both ends and our diamond on our main body. Okay, that looks very good, clean and consistent. Let's jump back to our punch table, drop in the last of our chisel holes, sew our main body together. Let's start with our gussets. These are going to be super easy to line up because we're starting from a center line. So on my pattern, I've got a small mark right in the middle. Let's drop that on, press that in. There we go. We've got a center line. So with our chisel, let's put one tine right in the middle of that. Now, first tine, center hole. Now, let's see, we can get 3 holes, maybe. Let's go with 2. So first 2 tines, the last 2 holes. And there we go. Okay, easy enough. Do the same thing on the other. Easy enough there. Now on our sides, let's come out. Say we were going to butt the inside of our first tine against that edge. So let's notice where that next tine would be. Let's start our line right there. We're going to work our way up to the end. Now, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but again, we want our holes to be parallel. That way, either gusset will fit on either side of our main body. So we do need to keep these as consistent as we can. So let's lay our square across. Good. Now let's drop our chisel in there. So therefore, we don't have to worry about one side having more holes than the other and our bag coming out a little crooked. And again, those come out just right. So let's reset here, pull out our main body. On our main body, we're going to do exactly the same thing. I've got a center line on my pattern, so let's center to both ends. Let's get that closer to the edge, and let's drop in our awl mark, just like we did on the bottom of our gussets. So we're doing exactly the same thing, which makes sense. So I'm going to go 6 on one side, 6 on the other, or technically 5, and then 2 beyond that. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Our chisel holes are on the bottom. So now we can count our holes here. I already have. We've got 41 holes, which is exactly 8 sets. So first time, last hole, we're going to strike 8 times. So let's do this. Let's come up to the throat. Our holes just about all come in right below our groove line. So let's do this. Let's do 8 sets down. And 8. We are going to line up perfectly. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other 3 sides. There's 7 and then 8. Now, if you had to go back and count, well, just join the club because I did too. Okay, let's step over and sew this together. With our deer tan, it's a little bit tough to see our chisel holes. So let's do this. We're going to sew the bottom of our gussets on first. Let's flip this around. There we go. Now I can see exactly where our gusset's going to fall into place. So let's just use a clip. I can roughly see that hole. Let's bring that up, clip it. Now let's just sew across right here. Now on this, we do have a place to hide our knot. So on our last hole, let's come through from our back. Same with our front. We're going to hide our square knot right down in there. And left over right, there we go. That is snug down in there. I am going to do the same thing on the other gusset. Okay, easy enough step thus far. So let's pull this out. We're going to swing this around. Now let's drop in a clip. Our stitch line is going to tell us where our two edges are going to meet. But let's just drop in a clip. Keep this from flipping around. Now, critical point here. We've got to make sure we are in our very bottom hole. If not, our purse is going to be a little bit crooked. Now again, a little hard to see on the chromes, but there we go. That slips right through. Let's pull that in and go through our bottom hole on our gusset. Equalize out. Now we're going to have to really press this down. So let's get 2 stitches in here. Good. Now let's force that corner down in there. Get a nice crisp corner on that. There we go. Good. Let's force that in there. Now let's take our clip and hold that right there. So that corner is going to work down in there as I sew. But let's go ahead and tighten that stitch down. There we go. Let's let that hang below. Good. Now let's simply sew right up to our corner. And look at that meat. Everything looks good, top and edge. That's because we counted our holes. We've got 41 holes everywhere. So everything's going to line up nicely. Now when we get down to our end, I would like to put in a double loop here. So let's do this. Let's come through our last hole. Now let's go back to our second from the last. Bring our needle through from the front. And from the back, just 1 ply. Now let's tie our square knot right here. And clip that off. Good. So that knot's going to tuck down in there. We can always go around the end. I'm just not a big fan because now we've got very exposed thread at a wear point. That could catch or wear. Eventually it's going to tear. The edge is going to separate. Now let's jump over to the other side. Do exactly the same thing. Okay, well that looks good. Notice too, our corners tend to sit down in there a little bit better once we get this second gusset in. So I'm going to tie our square knot here, down to the end, back to our second. We'll tie our square knot right here. Then we're going to change it up a little bit to sew the other side. Now with our pony, one of the things I love about this is we can C-clamp this in a bunch of different positions on our table. But this is just a basic pony. And in fact, I use this for the most part just for putting bags together. So let's slide that on. There we go. Now I can tighten that down if I need to, but for the most part, that's going to hold that very secure. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other gusset. Well, that looks good. Everything lined up. Very clean, very square, very symmetrical. Yay. Let's jump over to our main table, start knocking this together. We could always attach our straps flat and then sew our gussets. It's just hard getting this in and out of the pony. We'll tear up our straps. But here's the easiest way to go. Let's just go with a Chicago screw, basically threaded rivet. Now ours have the slot in the back just for an Allen wrench. Very easy to connect. But what I'd like to do, let's go ahead and drop a little bit of white glue in that screw. We're going to drop that in on the single hole in. Let's bring that in and simply attach right there. And tighten that down. Good. That Allen wrench makes all the difference in the world. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other 3 straps. And our straps are secured. Let's step over to our punch table, finish this out. Let's start with our billet. We're going to use a line 24 snap. I'm going to drop the cap in the end with the tab. Let's take the female piece with the flange on the outside and set this. We want to set this just enough to where it doesn't spin on us. Maybe one more hit. Good. That looks good. Yay. Okay. Let's do these next two steps in proper order because I don't want to crush my cap, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see where I'm going with this. So let's take a medium or 5/16 inch double cap, antique nickel. I'm going to drop my anvil under that, and on the back of our bag, let's rivet on our billet. One more. Good. That looks good. Now let's flip this over and add the other piece. The reason we're doing it this way is so that when we set this other side, we're not going to crush this piece. That sounds confusing, I know, and I've done that several times, but if you ever do that, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Good, because now we're not going to worry about crushing that rivet. There we go. That looks good. Okay, let's set this aside. Let's drop our O-rings on each of the four ends here. And again, I'm going to go with our medium double cap. The nice thing about these is the cap will snap down on the post without setting it. That allows us to set several snaps. Don't leave. Don't leave. There we go, look at that. I'm going to put that right to the edge so we can give that bend room to bend around and we get a good flat set. But notice our pattern, spot on. Okay, let's do that to the other three ends. Okay, those are ready. Last step. Now, we can go two ways here. In fact, let's move those out of the way. We can go two ways. What we're going to do is we're going to go around our O-ring and back down. So we're basically going to sandwich our main body in between the strap. I like that because that gives our D-ring a little extra room to move. So let's bring one rivet in. Now, these are our larger rivets. We're going through 6-ply here. So let's bring that through. There we go, and let's snap a cap on that, and let's do the same thing to the other rivet. We've got our rivets in. So let's bring this down, drop our anvil behind that, and set these two. Okay, that looks good. Now, one mistake to avoid, and I've done this so many times, we're not going across the bag. We're coming over to this side, so let's do the same thing over here. Okay, well that looks good. Let's do the same thing to the other side. Good, our holes are lining up so well. So last rivet, we are good. Let's get a better look at this beautiful bag. Well, how about that? Very clean, very professional. Not a single step here is difficult, but look at our outcome. Love this reptile. That just sets the whole design off. I don't carry a purse, but if I did, this would be my first choice. Durable, sturdy, handmade, and looks good. That's exactly what we were looking for. I hope every purse you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.